welcome to Fun Problems. The problems of fun. I'm Peter C. Hayward.
I'm AJ Brandon.
And AJ, I've got some very good news for you.
What's that?
Since returning from my travels, I have not swallowed a single bug.
How many bugs did you swallow during travels?
No, when I got back last time, I don't know if you remember, I took a sip of my water and discovered it was a breeding ground for insects.
Right.
This time, didn't happen. So that's my celebratory news for today. What do you want to talk about?
Today I want to talk about action selection systems.
So a few weeks / months back, we did an episode that we called the whole episode about... you had a very good title for it. What was it?
Entire episode about drawing cards.
Yes, because I'd been into playtest and I was like, I want to talk about this. And halfway through, I lost confidence in the episode. But we got some very positive feedback. I think it was actually a really useful episode. So this is a sort of sequel or another in that series, so to speak. But what's it about?
Action selection, of course, which is a very general term. But basically means what is a player able to do on a given turn? How do they interact with the game systems? It's the classic, the way that you win is by getting your race car from the beginning to the end. Okay, pick it up, move it to the end.
Right. Get out of here, playtester. You're not allowed to playtest anymore. Oh, it drives me nuts when people do that.
Yeah. But these are the... In one sense, they're the restrictions on players, but in a much more reasonable sense, they are the abilities of the players to engage with the game system. Yeah. And just before we get... Basically what we want to do was just do a quick thing on, why action selection systems are important things to think about and how people can think about them correctly or incorrectly. And we would just want to go through a lot of different examples to give you a lot of different tools in your tool belt that you can consider when you're designing a game.
100%. It's the classic AJ-led episode, so I'm going to jump in with thoughts out of order, disrupting his notes. Can I start,
Love
AJ?
It. You do whatever you want.
Really? Wow, that's a lot of scope. Okay, well, this episode is now all about the Stormlight Archives. So, in book one, I want to talk about worker placement, because worker placement is actually...
Sorry. But before we get to specific...
So I cannot
ones,
start.
I want to
go ahead.
Yes. So, action selection is really important to think about because in most of the bad, not published games I've played, a problem with them is that you let players do too much. Restrictions are what makes games interesting. Having to work within constraints and managing the capabilities that you have from turn to turn are really interesting. The two most important things I think about an action selection system is variance. You don't want to give players the ability to do the exact same thing every single turn in most games. Again, not being too prescriptive here, but having some degree of variety in those. And two is having it where those restrictions are something, or having a limited subset of the actions instead of always having access to all of the actions. You look like you have thoughts.
Yeah, that's such an interesting take. You don't want to give players the ability to do the same thing every turn.
May I give an example?
Yeah, please.
Worker placement, like you brought up. You can't go to the same spot every single turn in a row. You go to one, now it's blocked off. Now the next time someone's placing, it's different. You have a different subset of those choices.
Gotcha. Yeah, I see what you're saying. I just got to chew on that for a while. Is that prelude enough?
I think so. Go for it.
Well, I want to add to the prelude now, which is that there is
Sure.
a big range. I mean, it's funny. This podcast is about game design. And on one hand, it's very, very, very silly to act like designing a 5-minute 2-player abstract requires the same tools as designing Twilight Imperium. On the other hand,
absolutely,
they absolutely do. I used to do a lot of improv, and people love long-form improv. Long-form is when you get up on stage and you do a continuous something for an hour and then you leave the stage. And so it might be like a 2-man play completely made up on the spot, or it might be a series of connected scenes, or it might be any number of things. And in Brisbane and Canberra, especially where I did most of my improv training, people really wanted to do long-form. And they were told, no, you have to do short form. And short form is very much like looked down upon as like, oh yeah, whose line is it anyway? Like silly little jokes. But the fact is, if you cannot do a short form scene, you cannot do a long form scene. And I don't want to be as prescriptive as that and say, like, you can't design an 8-hour game if you can't design a 5-minute game. But I do think there's some truth in the fact that you can't design a 5-minute game. You can't design an hour game if you can't design a 5-hour game. There are probably endless examples disproving this, etc., etc. But it's one of the reasons that we recommend you start small and then grow what you're doing over time. So
yes, and there are counterexamples to these things.
Right,
All I'm saying is very broadly applicable, and abstract games are an exact example of course you're doing the same thing every turn in chess, of moving one of those pieces, or in shobu, those sorts of things.
Well, I was thinking even less abstract and more For Sale. For Sale is a game that we both admire as an absolute masterpiece. You literally do the same thing every turn in the first phase, and a different same thing every turn in the second phase. And yet it contains so much depth and strategy and stuff like that. And so that's what I mean when I wanted to highlight. We are going to be talking about a very wide scope of games. We could honestly do an action selection for hour plus games, action selection for 5-minute games. And the shorter the game, the less true I think that is. But the thing that I think remains true across all player counts is that there are different reasons to do things from turn to turn. You want it to be a different motivation to take an action at this turn, the next turn, the next turn, the next turn. Otherwise, the joy of game is making interesting decisions, and if the decision is obvious, it's no longer interesting. So I just wanted to kind of talk about the fact that there is a whole range of weights, and we're going to compress them in. But again, anytime you talk about game design, you're sort of doing that inherently. But here, I think it's more stark.
Yeah, and I'll just touch on one more thing to that note. You're going to want to focus either on not focus on to the exclusion of the other necessarily, but in light games, oftentimes you want the action selection to be a very simple and very consistent thing. And the variance comes from the way that the things that you're interacting with the action selection system. So with your example for sale, very good example, you're still choosing one of your cards each turn to play, and you reveal them do the same thing. But the things that are on offer change dramatically every turn, and the board state changes dramatically between turns.
And your options get more and more limited, I suppose. So that's shifting in a sense and taking away options. Yeah, it's. I was thinking of something like Uno too, which is obviously a very, very simple game. But every turn you either play a card, or if you can't, you draw until you play, or you draw a card. However it works. Different people play the game differently. Okay, so shall I jump into worker placement, because that's my obsession?
Go for it. Go for it.
Fun fact: I have not got any worker placement games published. I have one Critter Kitchen. Some people call worker placement, but it's not really. What's that?
I was just going to say, is Critter Kitchen? I haven't played it, but I thought it was.
It's not strict. It's not what we think of when we talk about worker placement. I do have one or two signed, but nothing out yet. But it's been my obsession for many, many, many years. And worker placement, the action selection system is very simple. You have a number of workers in front of you. You put them on a spot. In most cases, putting a worker on that spot means that no one else can go there. I don't want to get too taxonomical, but there is a type of action selection system that I think of as a menu, where you are picking from a menu something you can do. Worker placement is picking from a menu, but then kind of taking that thing off the menu for other people. This round, next round, it's back on the menu for everyone.
Right, and I think that's really important. When, again, going back to the common issues I see with new designers' prototypes, it's so often that it's here's the 6 different things you can do every single turn, and it just makes it so that part of the game is generally not super interesting. Because well, these 4 I don't really want to do, and this one I can just keep spamming if I need to. And having that extra layer of having to do the thing that isn't the optimal thing that you would want to do. If you just think, rather than having the menu of 6, you have 6 different cards, and you have a deck of those cards. And I don't have any cards that let me move this turn, so I can't do the perfect play. What's the next best play that I can make? With the hand I have. That's a really interesting decision.
I want to make a philosophical point, or an aesthetic point, which is that ideally, what you're asking players to do is something that they can physically interact with. So worker placement, you put something onto the spot. You can see it, and then you put something onto it. If you're playing from a hand of cards, you pick up the card and you put it out there. This is not universally true, but this is an aesthetic preference I have of I think that the choice you make should be somehow a physical like interaction. Anyway, what's on your list?
I think you may that don't do that.
It's hard to say.
Yeah, I think so.
Have you played Mosaic?
Some social party games?
I think about Mosaic a lot.
I have, but it's been a very long time.
So Mosaic is a game that I mentioned a few episodes ago that scarcity is the salt of game design. Scarcity makes everything like more flavorful. And you said something earlier that made me think of that, of like, I could just keep spamming this each turn. Cool, but now you're giving up your action for the turn. That's the thing that you could do. So now you can't do, if you do that, you're not doing something else. That matters the more scarcity you have. If it's like, oh god, I want to do this, but then they're going to get 2 turns ahead of me, etc. Mosaic sort of breaks the rule I just said, because on your turn, you can take some food, or draft a card from here, or draft a card from here, or just take this resource, or you can play a thing from your hand, or like it. Some of them are taking a card. Great, that's a very physical, like, I am doing a thing. Some of them are playing a card. Great, that's a very physical thing. Some of them are like, you just have to remember, any time on my turn I can just take 2 food. And yes, the action of taking food is a physical thing, but the action itself is not tied to anything. It's just floating in your head of like, right, yeah, I guess I can do that. The sort of easiest, most default action selection, and maybe I'm, again, my job here is to disrupt your notes and go out of order. The most simple is just to have like a reference card that says, here's the things you can do.
Yep.
And that's something that a lot of amazing games do. In the same way as most amazing games use victory points, because they are just the easiest way to get what you want. A lot of amazing games do this because it's just the easiest way to be like, what can you do on your turn? Here's a list. Here's all the things you might need to be able to do. Just pick one of them and go for it. There's nothing wrong with that. Aesthetically speaking, I have a strong preference for, the thing I'm doing is taking from a limited pool, or playing from like a limited pool in my hand, or, something that is, your options are tied to a space instead of just floating. Does that make sense?
Yep, I hear you. And I think that default actions, at the least, are, very often important in games that you always need access to it. But if, in my card game example, let's say that moving is always something you need. Okay, cool. Every card can be discarded to move, or those sorts of things. In terms of other action point-based systems that relate to what we're talking about here, I think Pandemic is a very obvious one. That one, you have a certain number of action points, and you can use those for any of the different actions. But the disadvantage of that is, one, you either have a very small number of choices, or you have a big number of choices. If you have a small number of choices, the problem with that is it's not often going to be super interesting to have that many small options, and you're doing the same thing a lot. If you have a big number of options, then you have to remember all your options, and that can be annoying, and they can often be like, these ones are super irrelevant most of the time, and you'll forget them the moment that you do need them. And I think that's what Pandemic has as an issue with it. And again, Pandemic's a masterpiece. No one is here saying, oh, what a terrible job you did with Pandemic. But also with Pandemic, note that many of the actions are tied to the cards in your hand. So you don't actually have access to all of them at the time. You have access to the basic ones that you always need access to, moving, removing cubes, those sorts of things. But for the ones that let you build buildings, or the ones that let you discover a cure for disease, those ones require not only cards, but specific cards in order to be able to use them. Even the flight ones require specific cards to go to specific regions. And so it does a good job of giving you the basics that you have, and then because all the cards, or because all the other actions are tied to cards in a very intuitive way, I think, it makes it much easier to remember those ones, and it introduces that sort of scarcity where you can't just do the same thing over and over again. Oh, I just fly over here, and just discard whatever cards I don't want.
Brass sort of not solves this like it's a problem, but Brass sort of does this in a way that has Brass is the number one game on BGG, so this is not me being like, I wish that Brass was better designed. It's been a few years since I played it, so I can't remember, but from what I remember, you have a hand of cards. Every single action you do uses a card in a different way, except one. And that one action, you still have to discard a card. I remember it being the thing that people most often forgot. So it does tie your actions to your cards, but with an exception, and that exception just, I remember, driving me bonkers. I'm going to quote from the Bible. All turn options should generally be put into one menu. They should not be a series of different menus of choices. You may do A or B or C is much faster than. You may do A or B, Then you may do C or not, and offers the players more freedom. Daniel Peachnik.
Our Lord and Savior.
I was actually trying to find a different quote. I couldn't. Because, as I said, I when I did my reread, I actually reread the entire thing from start to finish.
Amazing.
So I've got the whole thing in my head right now. Anyway, you keep going. I'm going to find this quote.
Sure. So I'm going to talk about bidding. There's a lot of different types of bidding. I will say up front that I think bidding I think it's fallen out of vogue, and I think it's fallen out of vogue for a reason. I don't think it's a super popular mechanic. Like, I think it's much more popular with hardcore gamers. But if you're trying to reach a broader audience, there's very few super popular bidding games that are like more mass or even like more casual gamer. And I think that a lot of that has to do with the barrier to entry for bidding games, because the bidding game has sort of two very skill testing elements. There's the assessment of how valuable things are. There's very few games where it's like bid on victory points, and it's just like, this is 1 victory point, this is 2 victory points, right?
Yeah.
And so first off, you have to be able to internalize the actual value of whatever's on offer. And two, you have to be able to resource manage the money that you have at the same time as understanding how much you need to bid to outbid other people. And some of those can be extra skill testing on top of some of these different systems. So I actually would not myself make a bidding game, at least not a heavier bidding game, for that reason, because I think it's just too narrowing of the market for what I want to do. But I'm not saying that it's like wrong.
And you're saying that bidding is a action selection system?
I thought of it as one, but I could see the argument that it's not.
I would say the action is bidding, but you're selecting how much to bid is the action selection system. But I would put that in a different category, I think, in terms of like tools for the toolbox, you know?
I see what you're saying. All right, shall we not go into bidding types
I think it's a slight tangent. I found the quote.
I think that's fair. I think it's fair.
A player should have 10 things they can do on their turn. More is fine, less is probably not. This is such an easy thing to do, so make sure you apply it to your game. Again, a lot of Daniel Peachnik's writing is very... what's the word I'm looking for? Like, definitive? Like, here is a fact.
Yeah.
But I just thought that was such an interesting way to put it. Like, I'd never thought of putting a numerical value on how many things a player should have to do. And all of his writing is about medium-light games, so kind of Radland's half-hour kind of style. But having 10 options as the right amount is just such an interesting call to me.
Yeah, that's very difficult to say because, like, in Pandemic, you could argue that you have 1,000 options on your turn because you could use those 4 action points in so many different ways, different combinations or whatever, that, like, when you say 10 different options, like, I would need to hear more specificity as to what he actually means by 10, you know? 10
things they can do, I guess, is how he's put it. Okay, so worker placement is obvious and apparent. Mm-hmm. What else is on your list?
Dice placement as the variant of that one. Do you have any thoughts on dice placement?
I've not really, like, I guess is Castle of Burgundy a dice placement game?
Yes.
And Alien Frontiers. I've played a lot of those too, but they're so different.
Artemis Project, played a bit of that.
Oh yeah, I did play that once. They're all so different. I don't know if I ever thought that unifies them. What did you have on dice placement games?
I was expecting you to have a stronger thought on it because I just know how much you like worker placement aside from dice placement. But
yeah,
I think that
I've thoughts on worker placement. So you've played Puerto Rico or San Juan, right?
Yep.
On your turn, you pick one of the 4 actions or 5 actions, however many there are, and you put that in front of you and no one else can take it. It's essentially worker placement with a single worker. Everyone reacts, obviously, that's the big twist. But in terms of like pure action selection, there are 5 options, you take one, and that means that no one else can take it. That's the core action selection system of those games. Almost every worker placement game could be a series of cards laid out, and on your turn you take that card and you just bring it in front of you, and at the end of the turn you put them all back. That's essentially the mechanism. So for me, I don't like worker placement games that don't have a spatial element because I used to get stuck on this when I set Sudokus. Why this is the question I'm always asking. Like, Why are we doing it as putting a thing out there instead of taking a thing back? Core Sudoku uses the numbers 1 through 9, but it could just as easily be 10 different symbols, or 9 different symbols, or 9 different letters, or anything like that. So if you look at my Sudoku catalog, which I know is what you were planning on doing after this podcast anyway, you will see that every single one of my every single one of my Sudokus uses the fact that they are numbers. Always. There's some additive property, there's some mathematical property, there's ascending, there's descending. There's always something that uses the fact that those are numbers, because otherwise my brain rebels and is like, well, why are they numbers? What's the point? So my worker placement games across the whole line always use some kind of spatial element, because otherwise, why are we placing workers?
So I think that's a very good thought. Sorry, do you have more?
No, I was just going to tie it into dice placement games. So for me, the question of like, why are they dice can be answered in a bunch of different ways. And that's why with dice, I'm like, man, I feel like, and maybe you've played more than me and you can start to lump them into categories. For me, every dice placement game I've played has been so different to the others that they're barely a category, you know? Because no one ever makes a dice placement game where they just function as identical workers regardless of the number, right? You're always asking that same question I ask, which is, why are they dice? And so people come up with different answers. Sorry, please continue.
No, you're good. So yeah, for dice placement, I think I just wanted to go through some of these like subcategories of both worker placement and dice placement. So because I think like you said, everybody knows worker placement exists, but the point of this episode is to give people different ideas of how they could use these tools, right? So with dice placement, Artemis Project is a great one to play if you want to just see a wide variety of ways that the numbers can be used. It's really interesting because low numbers are really good in some instances, high numbers are good in others, and oftentimes it's not even dependent on like which area of the board you're playing it to. It's dependent on the context of the board at that moment. So for instance, you're placing it at the get resources location. Well, low numbers have higher initiative, as in, they will take the resources first. Higher numbers obviously take more resources. You take the face value of the resources.
This is so also if Peter plays a 6 there. Pretty Kitchen.
Oh, nice. So if Peter plays a 6 to the resource area, he's going to get 6 resources. That's amazing. That's all the resources that are there. But if I then play a 3 there, and then my next turn I play a 3 there, well, I'm going to get 3 before him, and then I'm going to get another 3 before him, and then he gets zilch. So all of a sudden, it becomes very interesting. Is the high number better there, or is the low number better there? There's a auction system with the dice placement. You can only bid using the dice that you have. You can't just put down any amount that you want. And if someone wants to outbid you, they have to outbid you with the dice that they have. Again, you can look around the board. You can see what other people have as options for outbidding you. You can even place down a 1 to bid on something. And it's like, well, 1 resource, you're going to get outbid at some point. But then your next turn, you can put a 6 there. And it doesn't force you to bid the 6. It's you have the opportunity to, because you might not have the resources to be able to buy it. So if you have a 1 there and a 6, you basically locked it out from other people being able to buy it, and you get for only 1 resource. It's sweet. And then for some of the other mini games, it's you get workers based off of the numbers you put. So you might want to put a particular number because you want a particular worker. And then there's one that is based off of who contributes the most, so that when you do want the higher numbers. And there's one other one for getting workers or upgrade workers, and that one is numerical based as well. So there's a yeah, go ahead.
You know what's funny is that Alien Frontiers also has like 10 different systems, and none of them overlap with the ones that you just mentioned.
Wow.
Alien Frontiers.
Do you want to run through those?
Yeah. I haven't played it in many years, but Alien Frontiers does a lot of stuff where you have to put a combination of dice. So like as your turn, you need to put down 2 or 3 dice. So that is a whole different design space to what you're talking about. So one, for example, is you must put 2 matching dice. And if someone else has 2 matching dice that are higher than yours, they outbid you. So 2 6s is going to win. But if no one else has a pair, then 2 1s can take it. One of them requires only even dice. One requires only odd dice. One requires a sequential number of dice. So like 2 3 4 or 3 4 5. And I think, again, you can be outbid. So if I put 2 3 4 and you put 3 4 5, you've won that. My favorite one, because a lot of them were like higher is better because you're essentially outbidding on locations. But that's right. When you put them down, if yours are higher, you just replace them and they get their dice back. That's how it worked. Again, it's been probably 10 years since I played that. My favorite location was you just put a single die there, and you were going to trade one of the resources with another at that ratio. So if you put a 6 there, you can trade 6 to 1. If you put a 1 there, you can trade
That's
1 to
juicy.
1. So 1 is like suddenly like you're never stuck with 1s. You're like, oh, I got 1, great. I can go to the trading spot. There's probably more that I can't remember, but I just remember being like, there's such a variety of dice placement systems, and you didn't mention any of them in your while recapping Artemis.
Yeah, and I just want to touch on Castle Burgundy as well, because that one's a much more traditional worker placement one, where you use a number to either pick up a resource from that section of the board that matches the number you place down, or use the number to place the tile that you got from that section of the board onto your own little player board, but matching the number of the die that you put down. And so it's very simple in terms of how the dice are used, and it's very symmetrical. There aren't any mini games or anything. But the purpose of using dice over workers is because Castles of Burgundy is not a light game. There's a lot of different stuff to consider. And what the dice do, there is a little bit of manipulation in it, but it's very expensive. What the dice do is it focuses your attention, which I think is such a clever decision to make with this game. Yeah, it says like, yeah, you could manipulate the dice to be able to go to this or this one, and you can probably, if you really want to force your way into getting a particular thing, you can. But what it does is it makes you look at these a million of different tiles on the board. Instead of considering every single one of them, you say, well, I got 1 and a 3. What's at the 1?
Right.
What's at the 3? If
What
there
can
are
I
good
do with
options
this?
there, maybe I just take those. Yeah.
It also makes the game
I really need to...
much more tactical than it would be otherwise.
That is true.
And that's
which
probably
I think
true of
is
all dice
very
placement
important.
games.
Yeah, which I think is very important for a game like that, where the information horizon, if it wasn't random, would be absolutely enormous. I think
There
that's
are
a
random
big
things that
reason
come out
as to
each
why-
turn, but yeah.
I
Absolutely.
think it's a big reason as to why it's Stefan Feld's most popular game there.
It's my favorite.
Do you want to go into
for sure.
some subtypes? Yeah. Do you want to go to some subtypes of worker placement normal? Like normal worker placement, not dice?
Yeah, I'll talk about Feast for Odin, because that is easily one of my top 6 games. Feast for Odin does something really interesting where, firstly, there's, I think, 61 spaces on the board, which is too many. That's an absurd number of places. What he does is he makes them all very similar in a good way. So, like, you know, the three entire rows of spaces are just like, get a meat, or get a grain, or get a this, or get a that. But the thing that Feast for Odin does that I've not seen anyone else do is you have something like 7 workers at the start, and you get more as you go. And there's 4 columns of spaces that you can go. So to go to the first column, you play 1 worker. To go to the second column, you have to play 2 workers. To go to the third column, you have to play 3, and to go to the fourth column, you have to play 4. Obviously, they're getting more powerful as you go. So you could theoretically have 7 actions and just live in that first column. But realistically, you're going to want to do some of the more powerful actions. So you're not looking at your 7 being like, okay, what'll be my first action, then second, then third, then fourth, then fifth, and sixth, and seventh? Instead, you're like, okay, if I use some little guys to collect these resources, can I use like 4 of my guys to convert them before anyone else does? And you're mathing that out. So by sort of clumping your workers, I've never seen anything like that. I think that's a really interesting system. It does a interesting thing. Stone Age is another one that does dice. It does worker placement, but differently to everyone else. You've played Stone Age, I assume.
Yep.
You can put any number of workers in a spot. I think that instead of just being filled when someone goes there, it's filled when a certain number of workers are there. So I could put 3, and if there's 5 slots, you can still go there, but only put 2. The workers, you have a placement phase. Let's talk about that first. More broadly, most worker placement games these days especially are you place a worker, you take that action immediately. It's just a 1-to-1, like, instant resolution. Traditionally, worker placement, or the earliest worker placements, where you place in a whole placement phase, then there's a separate resolution phase. So I think the first worker placement game, or one of the first worker placement games, there was a big long road, and you would put a worker down, next player would put a worker down, etc., until all the workers are out. Then you would resolve it from the start of the road to the end. So you might be like, oh man, I really want to grab, I want to use this spot that spends 1 gold. Artemis Projects is like this too. I want to go to the space that lets me pay 1 gold to get a cow, but I need to have that gold earlier. So I'm going to put my guy down on the gold spot and hope that no one else takes the cow spot. So there's interesting tension there. Stone Age is that form where you do all your worker placement, then you do all the resolution. And the way that resolution works in Stone Age is if I put 3 guys out to hunt, I then roll 3 dice, and anything that's a 4, 5, 6, whatever the number is, I get meat for. So if I only put 1 guy out there, I have 1 in 2 chance of getting meat. If I put 3 guys out there, I have a 1 in 2 chance of getting 3 meat, but also, I could get none, etc.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think those numbers are quite right, but you understand what I'm saying.
Oh yeah, for sure.
So yeah, even just on a very basic level, place and then separate resolution phase is such a wildly different experience to place and instant resolve in the world of worker placement.
Mm-hmm. Do you have some more worker placement ones? Because I got some.
Yeah, you go. I've got nothing immediately springing to mind.
So Targi is the GOAT of worker placement, in my opinion. Have you played Targi before?
Yes. We've discussed our mutual love of Targi.
Excellent. You probably played it before, and I don't even remember. There might be a picture of us playing it in the intro. Who knows? But Targi's a really cool worker placement where you're placing along the edges of a grid, and you get a thing for placing them on the edges, like in a worker placement. But in addition, you're going to be playing multiple workers on the outside, and they're going to triangulate into a space in the middle of the board.
Yeah.
And the sections that they triangulate to in the middle of the board, you get as like a second worker placement bonus at the end of the round. And so you're not just picking what you want for the action right now, you're also setting up for that bonus thing. And also trying to block your opponent at the same time, because it's only a 2-player worker placement. So every action you take very, very heavily impacts what options your opponent has for their triangulation and their outside of the board actions. So it's super interesting. There's the... Yep, go ahead.
Worker placement... I can think of a few... Anachrony, Everdell... they will sometimes have this thing where you can place a worker either out on a shared board or on your little private internal board, and Anachrony ties that into mech suits in a really cool thematic way. But that's just another branch of worker placement that I think is worth mentioning. It doesn't have to be 100%. It's a communal area. It can be you can worker placement with everyone else, or you can go to your own spots.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a great call out. There's also games like Dune Imperium or Underwater Cities that tie in worker placement to cards as well. So with Dune, it's you play the card in order to go to that particular spot. With Underwater Cities, it's a little bit more loosey-goosey where it doesn't literally have workers, but you play cards, and when you play the card, there's a place that it goes to that gets you bonus, and the card itself will have an extra bonus if you played it to the section of the board that matches the area. So again, you don't have to play. You can actually play it to any of the open spots, but it's heavily incentivizing you to go to particular spots in a similar Castles of Burgundy way. But instead of giving you, slightly more strict handcuffs, they get you with honey, or what's it called? The carrot, not the stick.
Yeah. Lost Ruins of Arnak does something that I've actually seen very few people do, which is they have gated areas of worker placement. So there's 4 spots that anyone can go to, and then there's a whole section of the board that you have to pay to go to. And then there's another section that you have to pay even more to go to. And it's... Lost Ruins of Arnak, I think, has one of the strongest thematic tie-ins to its mechanics. So you are exploring an island, basically. And so you can go to... They're called base camp. You can go to base camp for free. To go further than that, you have to pay... It's also got a deck building element, so you have to pay from your deck building element to explore that area. And when you go there, it attracts a monster. And if you haven't killed that monster by the end of the round, then you get a penalty. Unlock it. When you go to one of those middle spots for the first time, you actually draw randomly what it does. It's just there's a lot of rules, but they're so thematically integrated that it really, really works. The not West Kingdom, the North Sea trilogy. Yeah. Each one of those was him exploring a different method of workplace, actually, and West Kingdom as well. all of his first 6 games in that series were exploring different worker placement aspects. Architects is the one that I always think of, where you can just keep going to a spot and it gets more powerful each time you do. So if I put a guy there, I get a bread. If I put another guy there, I get 2 bread. Then I get 3 bread. But if someone else goes to a spot, they can round up all of your guys and send them to jail and get a big reward for doing so. It's such a clever push and pull. It came out as I was developing Robotopia, and I was really worried that Robotopia was just the same thing, but it's different on a few different fronts. Raiders of the North Sea, you have 1 worker, and when you put it out, you have to go where a worker is already, and you take that worker back. So, again, different areas are gated, only 3rd level explorers can go to that island. But if you can go somewhere that a 3rd level explorer is, you can take it, and then next time go there. It's does some weird stuff, that game.
For sure.
Very common in worker placement.
Apparently,
we're doing a deep dive on worker placement. Is more actions coming out? Agricola does that by just one of 3 will come out at the end of each round. What's the D&D one? Lords of Waterdeep does it by you can actually build buildings which are better spots, and then when other people go there, you get paid, or if you go there for free or something like that. Go ahead.
Yep, I just had one more, which is Charterstone, which has standard worker placement, except that you can go to places with other people, and you bounce it back to their hand, and they get an extraction, which is an interesting twist on the.
Yeah, the only downside to that one, well, the big downside to that one is that it necessitates a refresh turn. So on your turn in Charterstone, you either place a worker or you take all your workers back, and you only have 2 workers. So it's place, take back, place, take back. And 1/3 of your turns, again, less if you're being bounced or as you unlock more of the game, but like 1/3 of your turns in a worst case scenario are literally just like, I take my guys back. Andromeda's Edge and what's the other Andromeda's Edge? Dwellings of Eldervale. They make that a really fun turn because you either place or take all your workers back. When you take them back, they come back to your ship or whatever it is in Andromeda's Edge and activate spots on your ship. So the take back actions are actually the bigger turns, and they took the weakness of Charterstone and completely flipped it and made it like the most fun part of the game.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, worker placement, dice placement. Check. I should talk briefly about my own games, I guess. Robotopia has a system where there's these hexes, and you can place on a hex to activate it, between 2 hexes to activate both, between 3 hexes to activate all 3. And then once they're out, they stay out, and another piece kind of comes along and clears them, so that the pieces are cleared externally. That's not part of the action selection system, but that spatial, like activating multiple spaces, is really interesting. And in fact, just having different workers who can do different things is sort of a twist on worker placement that more and more people are playing with.
Mm-hmm.
Providence, my big beautiful unsigned game, you can always access the internal spaces, but to go further than that, you have to have a space touching it. So it's almost like an exploration aspect. Like you can always go to a middle one, but then you're always planning your next turn. You're like, okay, I'm going to go there because then I'll have access to this spot and I really want to go there. Fractured Aether, the game that Alex and I are working on, does a similar thing, but without adjacency working the same way. You can go to a middle spot, and then as an action, instead of placing a worker, you can actually move it out. So again, it's got that pathing aspect, but you're deciding when to move out and clear a space for other players. So as I mentioned, all my worker placement games have a spatial element, because otherwise I don't know why they're worker placement games.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah. What else we got?
Mancala.
Is this a... How many games do this, I guess?
Very few.
Yeah.
Very, very, very few.
I was going to say, we have one, and Seth, friend of the podcast, Seth Jaffe has one, but I don't know of any others. Oh, and Feld, actually. Feld has one too.
There's the... what's the one with the gin that had the controversy about the slavery thing?
Puerto Rico?
It's like a big board, lots...
Endeavor?
No. I'll find it. Give me 2 seconds.
Sad that
you talk about Mancala as a mechanism for people who don't know what it is.
So Mancala is a very old game. You might have played it as a kid. It's my 7-year-old's been playing it for 5 years now. Even outside of me, like he was taught it by someone who wasn't a board game designer. On your turn, you pick up everything from a little bowl or a pool or whatever, and you drop them out one by one. And that's the core of Mancala. And it's being used as an action selection in a few games, including Pesticide, the game that AJ and I are working on, where you pick them all up and then you drop them out, and maybe the last one that you land on is the action that you take. So Seth Jaffe's game, Crusaders. You have a little 5-part Mancala, and you pick up all your workers, and the one that you land on at the end, you place your last thing on. You activate that at the strength equal to how many you have there. So it's this really interesting game of like, I want to build this up a few times before I activate it. And obviously, if you take them all from that, then you're no longer building it up. You're clearing it instead. I had a game I was working on for many years that was terrible. Agricultists, where it was a little pentagram. You were picking them up from the pentagram, but the number you picked up determined the strength of your action. So if you picked up 6 and then dropped them around, then whatever you landed on, you would spend the resources from that to do the 6 action or the 5 action or the 4 action or whatever it was. Trajan, I haven't played in so long. But you have different coloured pieces, and you pick them up, and you want to drop a certain color on a certain spot, and then you get to activate that in some way. So it's a really it's incredibly intricate. Actually, do you want to talk about how it works in Pesticide?
Yeah, so in Pesticide, we have it where the core action selection system is you choose an action tile, do what it says, and then your opponent gets to do the thing that's linked to it. But each faction has their own action selection sort of layered on top of that. So the card might say, for the faction that does Mancala, you get to add 3 tokens to the Mancala board, and then you perform the Mancala action. And then the Mancala will have its own rules for how that works. So in our game, what you do is you pick up all the tokens, and you drop them one by one, like Pierre said. The ones that they land on are going to activate. And each of the sections of the Mancala can activate in one of 2 different abilities that are, if you see a picture of it, it's like a triangle, so it layers, each one of the abilities layers over 2 different ones.
It has 2 borders,
so what happens,
so it can do either of the actions from its border.
Yeah. Right. And so when you're taking the actions, you can spend the tokens to do either one of the 2 actions. If you do it for an attack or for movement on the board, it's a tactics game, right? It goes back into your bag, and you'll have to take an action to put those tokens back onto your board. And if you spawn them onto the board to use them as units, then you take the tokens and you put them directly onto the board.
Spot on. So
anything where you want to add on
the number of actions you can do is based on how many tokens there are, basically. I think that's all I have for Mancala. Do you have more on Mancalas? Oh, did you find the game?
I was just going to name the name. Yeah. 5 tribes.
Oh, 5 tribes.
Yeah.
You said something. Oh, gin. I was imagining the alcoholic drink gin. Not genies. That's why I was like, Puerto Rico is the only one I can think of. You're talking about the genies, gin, DJINN.
Yeah.
Yeah, that one is that's a fascinating game. It's very divisive because some people are like, it's a spreadsheet, and some people are like, but I love the spreadsheet. But yeah, you pick up all the God, how does that work? You pick up all the guys on a spot. You Mancala them out, but in that one, it's not just around a circle like all the other ones. It's a orthogonal grid, so you can kind of go in any direction that you like. And then wherever you the last piece that you drop, and there's 5 different colors of tribes, thus the name 5 tribes. You get all the pieces of that color to do an action with. So you're really looking at like, there's a clump of red over there, so I want to end there with a red, and I'll get all of those red. As well as that, you activate the spot, and you get to build a camel there or whatever it is. It's a brilliant game, absolutely incredible game.
Mm-hmm. All right, rondel or rondel. Who's to say how it's pronounced?
This is your Jimmy Jam.
It's
you
a
love
very
a
rare mechanic. I love them so much, but no one does them right. So if you're a fan of
Shipyard, is that the one that has like 3 layered rondels?
Yeah. I actually haven't played that one, but that one seems too thinky for me. My brain too small.
Yeah. I was gonna say I don't think you would like it,
but
it's too good.
Yeah, but Matt Kurtz has a rondel in almost every one of his games. I think I don't think I've played a Matt Kurtz game that didn't have a rondel. And he definitely does them in a very interesting and very elegant way. Concordia doesn't have one, but most of them do.
What is a rondel?
A rondel, a rondel is you have a token on a track. Typically, it's a circle. I'm not going to get into pedantic arguments here, people. It's typically a circle, and you will move a certain number of spaces, usually in the same direction, around the rondel, and whichever one you land on, you'll take the action on that space. So it has some comparisons, obviously, to
Mancala.
To the Mancala game that we just said, except you've only got that one piece that you're moving, and it's a set number of spaces usually, or within a certain range.
I was going to say, it's normally like
up
to 2 or up to 3 or something like that.
Yeah, and often you can spend resources to be able to go further on it, but the idea is that if you are playing efficiently, you're normally going to have to make do with which actions are there, and it's very strategic because, of course, you can see if you go only one space this turn, you're not going to be able to get to this other space on your next turn because you haven't moved far enough. And there's a lot of different interesting flavors and permutations of it. My favorite one is from a massive, clunky Kickstarter game, Perdition's Mouth, which does the rondels in a really interesting way, where it's a cooperative dungeon crawl game. And what you do is when you move along it, you skip over other people who are on those spaces. So if you're on a space, you block it from your teammates but also they can go further along it, which means that you can like set them up to be able to get around the board to the action that they need more quickly. Really, really interesting design there. Like I said, there's a lot of different flavors of this, but I think it's a very underserviced mechanic in games. I think it's a pretty easy thing to teach. I don't think it's too complex or too... Like, it is a little bit weird the first time you hear it, but after your first turn, you're like, yeah, okay, I go in the circle and I land on the thing. It's not too complicated.
Rondels are actually something I've seen far more in prototypes than I have in published games. And I'm sure some of these games got published, but like I'm really struggling to think of a game other than Shipyard I've played that has a rondel in it. What's next?
So, those rondels. Time tracks. Again, got
favorite.
Depends on the time track game. Well, so I only like one game with the time track, but I do love the time track.
You love the mechanism.
And that's Thebes.
Not necessarily your favorite type of game, but your favorite mechanism.
Yes, absolutely correct. So there's sort of the simplest way to describe it is you'll choose an action to take, and sometimes that action is like from a menu. You can just do anything you want, like in Thebes, and sometimes it's from a subset of things, like in Nova Luna. You pick, or in Patchwork, it's you pick the next one of the next 3 tiles, and then you add that to your tableau, and whatever the cost is on, you move that far on the time track. In Thebes, it's you choose literally go anywhere on the board, take any action you want, which is always either digging to get some artifacts or picking up a card, and you're going to pay 1 time per space that you moved plus the time cost of the action that you took. And I think it's a very thematic action. I think it makes sense. Like it took you this 3 weeks to get over here because you moved 3 spaces. Cool. You spend 5 weeks digging, cost you 5 weeks. And I love the simplicity of Thebes being able to say, on your turn, go anywhere, do anything. It's very nice. And in that game, it's the carrot versus the stick thing. It doesn't restrict you in what you're able to. You can do anything you want that you can see, but it means that if you just zigzag around the board, you're moving very inefficiently. You really want to like plan your route and like move down, take the actions that you want as you go. And I think that's really interesting, and particularly in Thebes, because it's not because the costs are so varied, it becomes very interesting. You could literally go from spending 1 week to 15 weeks in one time space to 15. I think that variance is very interesting because whoever it doesn't go clockwise for the turns. It's whoever has spent the least amount of time on the time track that takes the next action. And I think that's very interesting to be able to like also chain moves together, where if someone takes a huge amount of time off, you can grab a bunch of little things, and choosing the moment to take that big 15 action thing is very interesting.
I will say that time tracks are one of those things that you can't just put into a game. It has to be what the game revolves around.
Yes, absolutely.
It's such a pivotal change in how you play that you can't be like, oh yeah, I threw that in. It has to be what the game does.
Yeah. That's one of the few mechanics that I think we couldn't fit into Pesticide because it's so based off of what the other player has been doing.
Yeah.
Maybe there's a way. I'll probably try.
I was going to say, I immediately thought of 3 different possibilities, but let's talk about Follow the Leader, which is what Puerto Rico and San Juan does. So we sort of touched on that. Race for the Galaxy and Tiny Epic Universe, I think, or Tiny Epic Galaxy does it as well. So this is a mechanic that I feel...
Twilight Imperium to some extent.
Which one, sorry?
Twilight Imperium.
Oh, yes, absolutely.
With the strategy card. It's not as like the core action.
Twilight Imperium is unfair because it has every mechanism in it. I think that this one is actually hugely underutilized in recent years. I can't think of the latest game I can't think of a game in the last 10 years that came out with this, except for maybe Tiny Epic Galaxy, and that might even be 10 years old by now. So the core of that is that there are some actions on your turn. You take one of those actions. It's typically a tile or a card that you take and put in front of you. You get a strong version of that action, and everyone else gets a weak version of that action. Or you get an action, everyone else gets like a little response action that might not be literally a weak version of that, but essentially fulfills that same role. It's it's a little bit like Time Track in that the game has to be built around this, because it becomes a game of denying your opponents, looking at what they have. Like, it's a hugely interactive mechanism. San Juan is my favorite game that does this, and one of my favorite games of all time. And you really have to spend the whole game being like, if I do the big farm now, I'll get a great farm and no one else can actually take advantage of that. Or if I sell now, I'll get to sell and everyone else will essentially skip a turn. So I guess it's a very negative interaction to play it efficiently, but I really think it's such a clever interactive dynamic.
Yeah, great example. I've got one that I've only seen work in one game. I've heard of it working in a different game, but I haven't played it. And I only know of those 2 games that have ever done this. That's the Arc Nova system. I don't know what you call that. Do you know the name of that
I
one?
think invented that, or at least definitely made it known.
Yeah, I think it was in a Civilization game before
Oh,
Arc
it was
Nova.
too. Yeah, you're absolutely right. Friend of the show, Jeff Fraser, was also working on a game that used that system, and then Arc Nova came out and basically buried his project, which is a pity because that was a super fun little game he was working on. Do you want me to explain it, or are you good?
Please, go for it.
So you have a row of actions available to you, and the ones that have been out for longer are more powerful, so they're generally pushed further to the right or whatever. Taking that is the most powerful version, but then it puts it to the left. Arc Nova does that by everyone having their own little row of actions. So if I really want a very powerful, I can't remember the actions in Arc Nova, a very powerful zoo action, I have to do my other actions until zoo gets to the very right, and then I can take it. Whereas the Civilization game that you referenced had a communal one, so the action that no one's taken yet is the most powerful. What's funny is that this is actually very similar to a mechanism that's in a lot of games, which is the unused actions get a little bonus on them. So Twilight Imperium, for example, the follow the leader mechanism we were just discussing, if no one takes the technology action, it gets a trade good on it. So it has become a more powerful action by very nature of no one taking it. But we think of these as 2 different systems, and they are 2 different systems, but there's a lot more overlap than mechanically than I think is obvious.
Yeah. Do you have any thoughts on this system, like using it? Because I have some.
I think it's an interesting system. I got nothing.
So my thought is, I tried using this once, and I was like, how the heck did this work in Arc Nova? Because in Arc Nova, it's baffling to me. Like I think since I played that one, that was before my year of going full time. I think I've leveled up like crazy as a designer. So I want to go back to those ones and see how they did it. My guess is that the issue with it is, why wouldn't you always just pick the strongest one, right? And if your actions are generically useful, you'll always pick the strongest one. And it's very interesting looking back on Arc Nova, because I remember when I played it, most of the time, like you're always trying to pick the 5, but most of the time I wasn't able to just be like, yeah, I'll take the 5. Most of the time it was like, well, I can take the 5, but the 3 and 4 are really juicy too. Or like, at this moment I need to do the 1.
I wonder if it's a sequencing thing. I think a lot of that has to do with like, I was thinking it was a, I'm not going to use the word tempo. I was wondering if it was a opportunity thing where where there's like a card that you really need that is like under competition. So you're like, even though I don't want to use the take a card action, I have to use it right now, because the deck in Arc Nova is so thick that it's like, I may never see a card with this trait ever again. Yeah, that's true.
But there's so many different kinds of actions on there.
Yeah.
I really wanted to replay, even though I didn't like the game at all, just to like study it and see how they pulled it off. I'm kind of in the same
boat. We should do that sometime. Because I've only played it the once, and we just had a future guest say yes while we were recording, so that's a nice feeling. I've only played it the once. I liked it plenty. I think I played with the wrong rule, and also it's so built for my brain that like it wasn't even close. Like the guy who taught it to me played it 50 times, and he taught me the game, and I completely crushed him. And I was like, okay, I should definitely play it more, especially against people who it is more for. But yeah, I'd be curious as well, because I agree that is such a tricky mechanism to get right. My thought was that it's about sequencing. Like, sure, you can take the 5 to do whatever, but there's no point in having the 5 if you don't have the resources to take advantage of it or whatever. That'd be an interesting one. Right. Let's talk about drafting. So, drafting is a very broad term. Let's talk about a pick and pass draft. So, a pick and pass draft is you are handed a set of cards, you choose one of them, and I can't think of any off the top of my head now, but there are definitely games where the one that you choose is your action for the turn, right?
Yes.
Yes.
Absolutely.
And so
sorry, you want examples? Yes. So, or do you want examples, or you just
the only one I can think of, and it's not quite what I'm talking about, is what's the Irish area control game?
Inish.
Inish. Thank you.
Inish.
Yeah. So in Inish, you are drafting the actions that you will later take, but there must be one where you take the action immediately. What are you thinking in terms of pick and pass draft?
So I'll give it another quick example of how to do the action one, because I think it's a very different example that's hitting on what you're talking about. Tsukiyumi. So in Tsukiyumi, it's like a Twilight Imperium-esque, huge, expansive game. It's much more revolved around combat than politics than TI is and those sorts of things. But in Tsukiyumi, you've got a hand of, I think it's just 4 cards or 5 cards, and the entire game is draft 1 card, pass the hand. Your round is that card, and the next round, you pick one of the 4. 3 cards come to you. Pick one. That is your round.
That's interesting.
Like that, and that's the whole game.
Yeah.
And so it's like when you get to the resource phase, this is how many resources you get. When you get to the combat phase, this is how many movements you can do. Each of those different things prescribed. So it's like, oh, I really want to get a ton of resources this round. Maybe that's all you do in the round. I just get 10 resources. I've got 1 million resources. And then you're setting yourself up for a future round. It's super, super cool. But yeah, for pick and pass draft, I think there's one really big element you have to decide, which is, do you reveal what you draft during the draft? That's a huge element of it. What it does is it makes it so that there's a lot more information that's publicly available, which allows skilled players to think about it telegraphs what the next card is going to be. And skilled players, I think, can take more advantage of that. But I think overall it makes it more accessible to inexperienced players. Because if you look at something like Sushi Go, right? Oh, first turn, you take the thing that says, if you have 3 of this, you get 10 points. Maybe I don't pass you that. The hate drafting element of, I take this, not because it's good for me, but because it's bad for you, is much more playable.
Yeah.
In a face-down draft, where it's like you take the card and it's hidden until the end of the round, or possibly forever hidden, who knows? It depends on the game. It means that the other players have to pay a lot more attention as to what could possibly, when a hand comes back around to you, what has been taken, what is still going to be left in the pack. Thinking ahead of not just what I'm taking and what the next person is going to take, but what can I quote unquote wheel, as in a pick and pass draft game where the hand is going to come back to you at least once, saying I'm going to take this card now because it's not the one I want the most, but the one I really want, I don't think anybody else needs that right now. Maybe it's going to come back around. Those are some really interesting decisions in those sorts of games that, again, can be informed by the simple act of revealing or not revealing the card.
Hey, I've got one that I'm curious if it made it to your list.
Sorry, can we do a little bit more drafting?
Go for it. Hit me. Draft away, my friend.
So there's the pick and pass draft. There's also the Seven Wonders duel it's on the table draft, but there's some hidden information. In that one, every round you have a different pattern of the cards laid out, and they alternate on the rows of face up or face down. And once all the cards that are in front of that particular card, always 1 or 2, I think, then the card that was hidden gets revealed. So one at a time, you're just taking one of the cards that is at the lowest point of the pyramid, or whatever shape it is, and then that may reveal cards to your opponent. They pick from one of the next ones. It's a very clever way of doing a 2-player draft that's in a much more interesting way than just the hand of cards, pick one, pass one sort of system. Right. Because in that, with 2 players, it always feels like, okay, after the first turn, you now have perfect information over the 2 hands, which makes it much less interesting and much more skill intensive and less accessible. But it also means that there's less excitement as well, because you're like, oh, I know I'm not going to get this thing. Whereas if you get 8 hands of cards, when the 7th one you're looking at, you're like, there's still a chance that the last one's going to come around and have that. And having those hidden cards face down, I think, was a very clever way of making that work in 2 players.
That is the rare game that I just don't. That is one of the rare games that I just don't want to play physically anymore, because I don't want to lay out those cards every round. I play that digitally all the time, but I just have no interest in physically sitting there and putting out 20 cards each round.
Totally fair. There's also a lot of different types of spins on drafting. There's a lot that I think are very inaccessible for Magic, like Rochester drafting, those sorts of things. And those are a lot of types of lay out a bunch of cards and then pick from the huge number of cards that everyone can see. And that, A, because not simultaneous, it slows things down.
Yeah.
B, it's a huge information overload. Yeah. There's a lot of games there's a lot of systems of drafting that revolve around those sort of, I think, unpleasant ways of drafting. And then there's Winston drafting, which I think is probably the most accessible one. I've actually got a Winston draft game that I'm pitching right now. And Winston drafting is basically the hands of cards are hidden from the players. And when it's your turn, you peek at the hand, one of the hands, and you say, do I want to pick up this hand? You get all the cards in it. Usually it starts with just one in each hand. You're like, do I want this card? No. You add a card on top of it. Similarly to the nobody picked this action tile in your early example, you put a resource on it. You look at the next one, you don't want it, put a card on top. Look at the next one, put a card on top. And then if you don't want any of the piles, then you're going to draw from the deck. And there's a lot of different ways that you can use that similar sort of system. Like, of course, that is a simultaneous system. It doesn't have to be. You could have a hand of cards. If you don't want it, you add a card to the hand and pass it on and just keep going until somebody takes the hand. There's a lot of different versions that could be looked at. But in general, I think it's just another broad concept way of looking at a draft that people could consider as a tool for designing.
Yeah, 100%. Okay, I've got one that I'm curious if it made it to your list. Board Game Geek calls it the chit pool system.
Yes, like Blitzkrieg.
Yes. Was this on your list? I'm just genuinely curious if this occurred to you.
I don't consider that action selection.
Oh. That's interesting. Why is that?
So, at least in Blitzkrieg, which is what I was thinking when you said it, you have a hand, effectively, of those tiles, and then you pick one to play. So to me, the action selection is where you play which tile you play and where you play it to, not which tiles did I draw from it. There are obviously ways that you can do chip pull as an action selection, like in our game Pesticide, we have a push your luck game, where if you pull out action tiles, those are the actions that you get. You pull out the action to do this, you can spend it to do this action.
I was also thinking
a game that does that.
Neuroshima Hex is the one that sprung to mind.
Again, I just see that as a hand of cards. So you draw 3 cards, play 2 of them. The action selection is the playing right? 2 of the 3 in my mind.
Yeah, okay,
yes,
so that's fair.
But again, to me, it's the playing, not the chip pulling.
Yep, that's a valid call.
Which, on that note,
yes, go ahead.
On that note, I have a number of action selection systems that are just play a card, but with a small twist.
Right.
Do you want to go into those now?
Yes. So let's do the most obvious non-twist version. You have a hand of cards. The cards reflect different actions you do. You play one of them.
Yep. So I did have Neuroshima Hex under this category of you get to play only 2 of the 3, or you can discard one and keep one. Like the net is you have to discard one of them. You may play the rest, but you can also hold on to them between turns. But you're only ever drawing back up to the 3. So you're like losing a lot of efficiency, but you can keep it for that like critical moment next round if you want to. There's the action retrieval system that's popularized by Concordia and Aquatica, where you play your cards, and once you played it, it's stuck on the table until you play an action to take all them back. There's a lot of different slight variations of it, but that's the gist. There's the Bonanza one, which is you have a hand of cards and you can only play the card that's been in your hand the longest. So you have to play them in like a certain sequence. When you get new cards, they go into the back of your hand.
Sort of like a reverse Art Nova almost.
Yeah, actually. Keyforge has an interesting one. So Keyforge is you have a deck that's made up of, I think it's 3 different factions of a subset of like 10 or something like that. Maybe it's 2. I think it's 3. And you can play any number of cards from one faction and use any number of cards from one faction that are in play. And that's really interesting because it's kind of a headwind mechanic against yourself, right? If you're like, I've got 4 of this card, cool, I play all 4. Next turn, you're probably not drawing a lot of that faction, so do you use the ones you have in play, or do you dump more of them into play? And then for your opponent, they have very interesting choices when they're like, oh, do I destroy the one from this faction to like make it so you've got even numbers, or do I destroy the one that's by itself? So you're only doing the big group that you probably don't have a lot of. Just an interesting little twist. Gloomhaven has the top and bottom combining card effects. Use the bottom of one, top of another. So good. I'll never stop talking about it. There's the chaining system where it's from Nightfall, and you can play any card to start, and then that card dictates the next card or cards that you can play. And so you have to decide, maybe you can't play your whole hand most turns. You have to figure out which cards are you going to try and play, and even if you could play like 4 of your 5 doing one thing, maybe it's better to actually do them in a different order to be able to get a different set of things. Plus, some of them, I think every card in it, maybe most cards, not all, will get a bonus for having a particular one before it. And so sometimes, again, you're saying, I'm only going to play 2 cards this turn because I really need to link this one into this one. Just a very interesting little puzzle you have trying to manage the hand of cards that you drew. And then the last one that I had for play a card but is programming, where I'm playing a card, but I don't get to do it right now. I'm setting up to do something, and then I have to see what the board looks like when it resolves.
Yeah. This is a very obvious, very simple twist. Draw cards, play 1, discard the rest. It's a very subtle thing, but it really reduces the information horizon. Can cut down on a lot of. Yeah, it's just a very simple way of mixing up what you can do in a turn. Mm-hmm. Hey, what else you got?
So this is a very specific one. I've only seen one game do this, but I've seen a lot of games do like some flavor of this, which is basically a version of like engine building. Have you played In the Hall of the Mountain King?
Yes.
So you know how it builds up like a pyramid? You play like a card, and then you can activate like a card and all the cards below it. So you play one, it just sits there. You play that one,
it's very
goes
Tim
beside,
Armstrong.
sits there. But
if you listen to our helpful advice episode, Tim Armstrong, that's the kind of stuff that he like designs all the time.
Right. And so then if you got like 2 in a row, you can put one right above those 2. And then when you go to activate, you can activate the one that's on the top and then trickle down one way or the other. And so over the course of the game, it builds up and up and up, and you sort of find little pathways through the actions you've taken. I just think that's such a cute, cool mechanism, and I'm shocked I haven't seen it since then.
Yeah. You got to play more Tim Armstrong games.
Apparently. Sounds like I like them. I also appreciate how much Tim Armstrong talked about how he likes elegant games and how he likes short playtimes. Like, how have I not played all of his games?
I
may not have played any of his games, actually.
Oh, you gotta check him out. He's very good at what he does. Hey, I got some weird ones, but I want to get through kind of the broader categories first.
I only have one more for me, and this is not even. This is just a spin. So, roll and write is a very common game type, and I have seen a million games that are just roll and write. It's roll a die or flip a card and then do the thing. And I think that there's a lot more room for combining action selection systems with the puzzle of the roll and write at the end. There's obviously a reason why most of them don't do that. It's very nice to have like the simple thing that gives you the resource and then figure what you do with it with your more complex puzzle. But as an example, there was a series of games, Draft and Record, I think it was what was called, the series.
I don't know.
And that one was very simple. All it did was say, instead of randomly flipping a card, you have a hand of cards. Pick a card, like you're drafting one, and then pass the hand. It's just a regular pick and pass draft, but that's how you get your resources or whatever you're using for the roll and write portion of it. And that's cool. And that makes it much more interesting to me because, it interests a lot of like player interaction, that sort of thing. And that I think that there's a lot more space for people to design games that are doing that sort of thing. And even Sonara. Sonara is a roll and write, but the way that you get your stuff is by a crokinole minigame where you're like flicking the disc and trying to get over certain spots. I think that there's just a lot more space for the way that you're getting resources to become an action selection mechanism instead of just handing you the things. Sorry. One more example on that one is Tiny Towns, where in Tiny Towns you just pick whatever you get, but everyone else has to take that thing, and you don't necessarily want it, because you're trying to
You've
use
got
resources
limited
to
space.
build certain things, but the resources take up space.
Yeah. Let's talk a little bit more about menus, actually, because I just realized we didn't touch on the... Obviously, a menu is just like you have a reference card or just an inherent knowledge of the things that you can do on your turn, and maybe you can do one, maybe you can do two, maybe you can do two different. There's different ways of doing that. One thing that, and this is the one I mentioned earlier, is like kind of the default. Like a lot of great games do it because it's just the easiest way of getting stuff into your head. The game that we ended up signing with Keymaster, Mightier Than the Sword, originally that game was a menu game with variable costs, and you had Radlands does a similar thing. You have 3 water per turn in Radland. In this one, you had 5 gold or something like that, or you drafted how much gold you could have. I can't remember exactly how it worked. And then you had that to spend, and so it was something like 1 gold to move, 2 gold to attack, 3 gold to add a new guy, 4 gold to build a building, something like that. The locusts work kind of similarly with their petals, obviously a little bit different. My co-designer was very strongly against this. He said a menu of stuff you can keep in your head, a menu with variable costs suddenly becomes a whole different game. And so I think that they are 2 very distinct branches of the same thing, which is you get X actions, which are essentially resources on your turn, and you can do any 2, or you can spend them to do more complex ones, etc., etc. Any thoughts on that mechanism?
By the way, I have no thoughts on that mechanism, but I did think of one more mechanism.
Hit me.
I can wait till you're stuffed up. Worker movement.
Yeah, we talked about that a little bit, but Istanbul is probably the best example of worker movement. You can move 1 or 2 spaces in orthogonal, like up or up left or up right or whatever. It's an interesting one because it's so limiting. Like Istanbul, I think, gets away with it because there is the additional puzzle of like dropping off and picking up assistance. Without that, I think that would be a really boring system because it's sort of like worker placement, but it's like an arbitrarily limited worker placement. I mean, Fractured Aether is literally worker movement, so I shouldn't be too judgmental. But it's yeah. Do you have any thoughts on worker movement beyond Istanbul is great, obviously?
Yeah, Istanbul is very good. I think that there's a lot of different flavors of worker movement you can do. In Istanbul, you have 2 workers, right? And you can move either
Just
one of
one.
them. Is that correct? Or am I misremembering?
Okay. Just the one, yeah.
So you can have multiple. Yeah, so you can have multiple workers. Airship City, you have 2 workers, and in Airship City, when you move 1 space. But if there's another player there, whether it's yours or an opponent's, you can leapfrog over them. So you can't go to the spots that they're on, but you can move around the board much more easily. And because you've got the 2, you can use them in different combinations to like set one up to be able to jump over the other, which is quite interesting. And in the colonists, that's one where everyone shares the same single worker. And so when you're moving, you're not just thinking, what am I getting? You're also thinking, what am I setting my opponent up to be able to use? And do I want them to be able to like get to this area of the board? Are they going to move me away from where I'm going to want to be able to go on my next turn? A lot of interesting different flavors of that you can do.
AJ, this is embarrassing. We've forgotten the ultimate action selection system.
The one from Blades?
No, even better. Better than we could ever come up with.
Okay.
Roll and move. You
So
roll
true,
the dice,
so
and
true.
that tells you how many spaces to move, and then you take that action. Unsurpassable.
And there really just haven't been that many in recent years. What a waste of an amazing mechanism.
It's a sadly forgotten genre. My game Sunshine City was a roll and move rondel. So you'd roll, but then you had 3 things that you could move around the rondel, and I was very happy with that. That was my attempt to make a roll move. Okay, I got some weird ones.
Let's hear them.
So coup is really just a menu, but it's a menu where you can... So if you haven't played coup, you have 2 cards face down in front of you. They give you access to 2 actions, and you have like 2 default actions. So you can do the 2 in front of you or the 2 default. However, you're not just limited to the 2 in front of you. You can claim to have any card face down in front of you and do that action. And if people believe you, you get away with it. But if someone calls you out and you have it, then they lose a life. If you don't have it, then you use a life. So it's really just an action menu with bluffing. I've been thinking about Coup so much lately. It's such a brilliant, brilliant game. Magic Maze. Magic Maze is just
true.
The actions are up, down, left, right, use escalator, but they're distributed among the players. So I might have left and up, you might have right and use escalator, and someone else might just have down. And the game is a real-time limited communication game where you just have to glare at the person until they realize it's their job to move down. It's little twists on that are just like, that game sold tens and tens of hundreds of thousands of copies probably because it's just so simple and so clever. I wanted to ask you if you considered Action Flip to have an action selection system, or if that's a whole different kind of thing.
You mean Captain Flip?
Oh, yeah, sorry, Captain Flip. Captain Flip.
Yeah, okay. I do consider it to have an action selection system. The action selection system in Captain Flip is, so you draw a tile from the bag, and then you choose to place it somewhere. That's part of it. You can place it on the lowest point of anywhere on your board, or you can flip it and then place it at the lowest point anywhere on your board. And so to me, the action selection is the do you want to flip it and where you place it element of it. That's a really good example.
Yeah,
it's a weird super interesting because yeah, it's got like a push your luck element because you're like, well, most of the time it's not like this is terrible for me. There's very few terrible for you tokens, and most of the time it's not amazing for you. But there's always going to be at least one in the bag that you're like, I really want that one, and there's probably always going to be, at least after the first few turns, at least one where you're like, I really don't want to see that one. And actually, I guess, even on turn one, there's one that you really don't want. So yeah, every single turn of the game, I think probably, there's at least one that you really want to see and at least one that you really don't want to see.
I just realized what my favorite rondel game is, by the way. Great Western Trail.
Yes.
That's
a very mainstream example that people would actually know.
Yeah. Okay,
no, but you're right. It absolutely is a rondel. Absolutely.
Do you have any weird ones? Because I have some final thoughts, if not.
I don't think so. Go for it.
So, we've been talking about a bunch of different action selection systems, and I think the thing that I really want to emphasize here is that you don't need an interesting action selection system. And this is sort of what our Cards from a Hand episode was talking about too. Like, you want these tools, but you always want to pick the simplest one that accomplishes your goals. I was looking through my list of published games or upcoming games to be like, what weird action selection systems have I come up with? And I realized that, Critter Kitchen, I guess, is a slightly weird action selection system, but that's a whole different ballgame. I realized that my favorite games that I've made don't have one. So I talked a lot about Genome Run for a while, which is my solo roguelike. The action selection system in that game is you have a hand of 5 cards, you play one, you draw one. You play one, you draw one. That's it. There is no real action selection system in the way that we've been talking about. And yet, like, that very simple structure has led to one of my favorite games I've designed. That Time You Killed Me, your action is you move. Or I guess you have a menu of actions depending on what you're doing. But, like, the simplest way is almost always the better, and you can tell I've been reading Daniel.games and it's very stuck in my head. Even like some of the great games, like I was saying, a lot of them just use the menu because it's just the simplest way to do it. You don't need a complex action selection system. And often having that action selection system becomes the whole game, so you kind of want to pare it down to that. There are times where you want like a complex one in a complex game, but generally speaking, I've talked about this before. I had dinner with Eric Lang once and asked him why he had made the monsters in Blood Rage have the same attack as cost. And he said that he wants to simplify as much as he can so that your brain is being used for strategic decisions, not to like pass what you do. If people have to, Istanbul's an example of the opposite of that, where like the action selection system is so mind-boggling, it often takes people like 2 or 3 games just to understand how to not screw themselves over. But that is the game,
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
So the goal here was to give you tools for your toolbox, not to be like, ha, mess with your players by giving them a weird, complex, wacky action selection system.
Yeah, it's kind of like if you're teaching cooking classes and we're like, all right, saffron is the most expensive ingredient in the world. And you're like, oh, okay, cool, I'm going to use saffron everything.
Yeah.
Here's my saffron burger and my saffron milkshake.
Yeah, or if you're like,
the
okay,
right
you can
tool.
use an oven, or you can get this incredibly specific, hyper-complicated device. Or when people start podcasting, they're like, oh, I need a fancy mic and this, and like, no, you just need a mic. Like, you just need to, you don't need to overcomplicate it. Sometimes, yeah, you need a specialist tool, but most of the time, the vast majority of the time, you do not. I have a publisher tip for you, AJ.
Let's hear it.
Publishers don't want to cannibalize their own sales. I ran into this twice recently, actually, so I thought it was definitely worth mentioning. I have a publisher looking at a game that has a theme that's similar to the current game they have, and they're going to retheme it. And it makes sense. They don't want to have, I don't want to name names, but let's say it was a battery-themed game. You know how I'm always making battery-themed games, AJ?
All the time.
If they already have a battery-themed game, they probably don't want a second one. Maybe they want to put it into a world or something like that, but 90% of the time they don't. And 90% of the time, if it's going to be in a world, it's going to be the same designer. So publishers, A, don't want a game that's too similar to a game that they have thematically. And B, they definitely don't want a better version of a game that they already have. And I'm talking especially of games that are like selling year after year. Maybe if they did one 5 years ago and it stopped selling, maybe they want a new one, sure. But if they've got a hit, they don't want a game that will make people like, oh, I can buy either, the battery game or this one that people say is slightly better from the same publisher. They're just eating their own sales at that point.
Good tip. All right. Do you have a really fast, fun question?
Yes, fast fun. Let's go. Oh, you want me to ask that?
Yeah. I don't have a fast one off the top of my head. Do you?
Oh my god. Let me check my notes.
We're doing a fast one because Pierce's internet keeps dropping, so we don't want it to drop while we're chatting too long. What's your favorite animal?
So,
no, that's the fast one.
The traditional answer is giraffe and zebra. I cannot decide between them. I'm so fascinated by both. But I'm wondering if ants are a contender. Like, they're an animal. They're not a mammal, but they are an animal. So, and I as you know, I really love ants and bees. But traditionally giraffe is the safest answer. But I'm in internal turmoil here, AJ. How about you?
I love so many animals so much. My wife was like, oh, I think axolotls are his favorite animal. I was like, that's not even my top 20. And then I was like, here's the top 20. But like, actually what my favorite one would be, I think I have to go with octopus. Octopus are so cool. They can color change. They can squish their shape really flat. Their tentacles have part of their cognitive abilities and stuff like that. They're super smart. They're so cool.
Did I tell you I have stopped eating octopus?
I did too. That's on my list of things I can't eat anymore.
They're so smart, and it doesn't come up often enough to actually be a problem. Like, while I was in Australia, we had a lot of fish and chips because Australian fish and chips is so good. And I just had to keep on not having calamari rings. And so it's not like I'm going vegan, but like I did make that conscious decision. I'm going to stop eating octopuses. They are just too cool to eat.
Same here. And it's sad because calamari is so delicious.
It's so good. It's the intelligence. It just really,
I'm right there with you.
AJ, when my internet's failing, how do we end the podcast?
By saying goodbye. What?
Bye, everyone.
Thanks for joining us. You can find us and our incredible Discord community in the show notes, or reach out to us privately at funproblemspodcast@gmail.com. We'd love to hear from you. If you enjoyed the podcast, please tell a friend.